Joined today by two awesome guests, two of the young guns on the high school mock trial circuit this past season. We'll start with my friend in California. Tell them who you are.
Hello, my name is Matthew Wright. I just graduated from Venture Academy. I did mock trial there for 4 years. And next year I'm going to UCLA.
And from Village Home, who's not yet graduated, my friend from Oregon. Tell them who you are.
Hey, my name is Mueller, and like Phil said, I'm a senior at Village Home.
So Will and Connor just got, we're filming this at the beginning of the fall, and Will and Connor, it feels like it was a couple weeks ago, but it was a couple of months ago, just got done competing in the Gladiator National Mock Trial Tournament, which is the high school one-on-one competition inspired by Top Gun that was invented by Baylor Law, the law school one-on-one competition. So the two of you had just excellent seasons kind of leading up to Gladiator. Starting with Connor, I learned this morning that your school won your county competition 7 straight years. You competed in 2 of the Empire competitions in the fall of 2020 and won both of them. You competed at Empire in the fall of 2019 and you won that. You were at Gladiator the year before this and were 10th. You were Gladiator the year before that and were an honorable mention. So you just had a really, really incredible run, both this past season and the lead and then even kind of before that. And same with you, Will. You and I had talked a lot before the competition about your run. And I just want to read it to make sure that I get it right here. You were the runner-up at your state competition this year. You were the runner-up at Empire Chicago, the runner-up at Empire New York, the runner-up at Empire Atlanta. You told me before we started recording that you were the runner-up at Empire San Francisco in 2019. And so that's a lot of second places, but that is kind of hard to do. So I think one of the interesting dynamics of the Gladiator 2021 final round, and this is kind of something that I think the average viewer probably wouldn't realize unless they're paying really close attention, like I'm sure the 3 of us do to the mock trial circuits at all 3 levels, is that you guys were having these kind of really crazy seasons, at the same time. Will had those Empire runs and the great finish in the state competition. Same with you, Connor. And actually the 2 of you met in the final round of Empire Chicago. I think it was in October when you drew Will in the final round and the announcement was made that it was going to be you and Will in the final. I mean, how did you feel? Were you kind of like, here we go again? Did you expect it? What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's expected. Will is a great competitor, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, you bring your best game for whoever's in, every round, right? And for Will, I know Will's a great competitor. I had seen him, you're right, at Empire Chicago in the finals, and his team's great, but specifically he's great. So facing him specifically, you just want to do your best, and I'm sure he's thinking the same thing. I'd say he's the best on his team. He's, going to be around next year doing the same thing. And so you just do your best against competitors like him, I say.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like, obviously I had seen Connor in the Empire Chicago final, and your whole team, and especially you, is just amazing. So I feel like there was a sense of nerves when I knew I'd be playing you in the final, but at the same time, I was excited because I knew it was going to be a really great round.
So we're about to watch the first witness who testified in the final round. It was Will's witness. Will represented the plaintiff and Connor the defense.
Plaintiff, please call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Morgan Levin to the stand.
You can proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So before we get into this, the witness is a competitor named Yashida Kaswani from Henrico in Virginia. And I think we will all agree that she was just excellent in this round, as we'll see in a second. This competition was unique in that we had a witness component for the first time ever. where the witnesses were competing in the semifinal rounds to see who was going to be the witness in the final, and the judges were scoring the witnesses in the semifinal based on their scores in the prelims, to see who was going to be the final round, who were going to be the final round witnesses. Will, you chose plaintiff in the final round because I believe you were the higher seed. How did the fact that Yoshida was going to be in the final round factor into your decision to select plaintiff, if at all?
Yeah, I think it was a factor. Like, obviously it wasn't the deciding factor. I think that would just be that I felt my plaintiff side was better. I felt more comfortable with it, and that's ultimately what led me to choose it. But yeah, having the luxury of directing her in the semifinal and knowing that I didn't really have to prep her as a witness, knowing that she was obviously excellent as a witness, I could just go into the final and be comfortable with that, was definitely a factor in why I chose plaintiff.
What did you tell Yoshida before the final round? I mean, given that you had just prepped with her on the exact same side in the semi a couple of hours before, what did you say to her?
Well, I remember I was kind of freaking out about having to prep the motions, which was an entirely new aspect. So I think I emailed her and was like, if it's cool with you, I like what we did in the semifinal. We can just go right into it without prepping. And she was cool with it. And I think it ended up going well. Good afternoon, Ms. Levin.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
My name is Morgan Levin.
What do you do for a living?
Well, currently I'm a full-time student at UCLA.
What do you study?
Biology. I'm in my senior year.
Ms. Levin, could you open your exhibit book to Exhibit 2?
Of course.
Mr. McGough, we could take that down for now. Do you have Exhibit 2 in front of you?
I do, yes.
What is it?
That's Jessica at our high school graduation.
The plaintiff offers Exhibit 2.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admitted.
Mr. McGough, can we get that on the screen? Ms. Levin, how did you know Ms. Marks?
Well, Jessica and I met back in middle school in 2013. We were inseparable ever since then. We did everything together. She was there for my first boyfriend, when we took the SATs together, when we got our driver's licenses. She was there for all of it.
Ma'am, when did you last see Jessica Marks?
So, Will, I saw you compete at Empire, and I saw you compete at Gladiator last year. And I think one of the things that I noticed in this particular round in comparison to some of your other rounds is that you made a really conscious effort, at least it appeared, to improve as a performer. We can see just in that first minute, you did the sympathy kind of tone and the way you asked those questions. I thought you did it really effectively. What kind of adjustments did you make, if any, coming into Gladiator? What were you trying to improve on over those couple of weeks before the tournament started?
Yeah, well, first off, I think you're exactly right. My first couple of years of mock trial performance was definitely not my strong suit. I don't think it is now, but it was always definitely a weakness. So I did make a conscious effort to improve upon that, especially for Gladiator. I think specifically what I did was just watch back recordings of myself doing the direct to notice things that, facial expressions that weren't good or gestures that were too small, things like that. And I just made a conscious effort to, slow down, vary my tone, things like that.
Freshman year, I would watch, YouTube. I'd watch what was available, and Gladiator had, Cinema Trial had their Gladiator final rounds, and I think I could, at the time, basically recite every line from those rounds because I just watched them. It was Andy Parker, Megan Jones, Audrey Shepard, all those really good attorneys from 2015, 2016, 2017. I was just really familiar with their style and their presentation. And so going in this year, I'd say that it was more about just toning it down and not being like over the top to the sense that it's obnoxious. You want to keep it very, attorney-like in presentation. Like, and I think Will does a good job of having, and it might just be his material in conjunction with his presentation, but he has a very good and methodical presentation, especially for this witness who is already starting off as, a sad witness, going through her events with Jessica, saying, I was there for the SATs and the driver's test. It's just really good to see Will's presentation on this witness.
I last saw her on March 24th, 2019.
What happened that day?
Well, that night, we had both gone to a bar, and as Jessica was driving home, I was in the Uber right behind her, and I was on my phone, and I looked up, and her car was swerving, and I thought she would be able to fix it, but just kept going, and suddenly it fell into a ravine.
Did Miss Marks make it?
No, she didn't.
I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Levin. If it's all right, I want to talk more about what happened on March 24th, 2019. When did you first see Miss Marks that night?
At around 6 p.m., she came to pick me up.
So, well, one of the things that I liked, and to Connor's point a second ago, is I thought it was really smart, and it wasn't something that I'd seen people do at Gladiator or even Trial by Combat, was kind of front load the accident and start off with a bang. Like, here's what happened. I was at a bar with my friend and she's dead. She crashed, and describe the crash first and then circle back. Most people that I saw were doing it a little bit differently. They were going strictly chronologically. Who are you? Let's talk about that night. Let's talk about how drunk she was. Let's finish with the crash. Did you have a discussion with your second chair, with your coach, about strategically why that made more sense?
Yeah, so I actually think up until like 6 or so days before the competition, I was just doing it completely chronologically, like you're saying most people did, starting with the beginning of the night, ending with the crash. But as I was running through it, I felt like I just had the idea to put it at the beginning, because I thought with my theory, it would have been more effective to end on them, saying we might need to cut Jessica off, stop serving her, and then not serve her. I felt like it was just as effective to have the emotion at the beginning. And then I also got to end on a really strong point for my theory.
And we went to her Airbnb.
Did you and Miss Marks have any plans for that evening?
We did. We planned to make a pit stop at our Airbnb and then go to a bar, Sunny's Rooftop Bar.
Did you end up going to Sunny's Rooftop Bar?
Yes, we did. We got there at around 9 p.m. that night.
Do you remember what time you left?
At around 12, we stayed there for around 3 hours.
Slevin, from 9 to 12 that night, who served you?
Sunny Mehta, the owner of the bar.
Did either you or Miss Marks order drinks from Mr. Mehta?
Yes, both of us ordered a few.
Slevin, could you open your exhibit book to Exhibit 17?
Yes, of course.
Slevin, what is Exhibit 17?
It's the receipt from that night. It has all of our drinks and the food we ordered.
Does it look fair and accurate?
Yes, it does.
The plaintiff offers Exhibit 17.
No objections, Your Honor.
I mean, I think I need to say this one more time. Yoshida is just so good. I mean, even though this was the second time you did this, it was only the second time you did this that day. Like, it wasn't like you'd been practicing for weeks like you do for most tournaments. When you guys practiced for the semifinal, did you spend like a lot of, like, how was she doing so well? It was so conversational. What was the secret?
I don't know. I mean, I remember for the semifinal prep, I was just like blown away because I was going through it and she was just answering it exactly how I wanted it to be answered, with like the exact intonation and all that.
Had either of you seen Yoshida throughout the season as either an attorney or at another tournament or in the prelims at this tournament? Had you come across her at all?
Back in 2019, in person, I think we faced Henrico round 1, and we sort of just developed a friendship with that team specifically. and it sort of carried itself throughout Empire 2019, and then in 2020. I don't know if we saw them specifically, but we were in contact with them, and they're just a great team. And they have good witnesses and good competitors, and so we were familiar that it should be really good.
17's admitted.
Mr. McGough, we get Exhibit 17? Thank you. Just one moment, Your Honor. Ms. Levin, how many of the drinks on this receipt did you order?
Well, we ordered a bottle of wine and I had one glass of that. And then I had a can of beer and also one green tea shot that night.
Were you there with Ms. Marks when she ordered?
Yes, I was.
What drinks did she order?
Well, she had a couple glasses of wine to drink, I think around 3 from the bottle of wine, then the 3 White Claw cans and a beer and also a green tea shot.
I want to talk about how Ms. Marks was acting after having those drinks. Could you open your exhibit book to Exhibit 10?
Yes, I can.
What is Exhibit 10?
Exhibit 10 is a video I took of Jessica that night, of her behavior.
The plaintiff offers Exhibit 10.
Yes, Your Honor. Objections 403.
Can you explain the 403 objection?
Connor, was this an objection that you had made in the prelims, or was this specific to this final?
I don't remember if I made this objection in the prelims. I might have made it in the round before. I think I was defense as well. We sort of had objections where, there isn't a ton of material to object to on Williams' behalf. I think that was one of the big compliments on behalf of Williams' material was that it was bulletproof. It was very, very good. It was very well made, as we just talked about how he sort of structured everything was the term. And so I was just trying to find objections that could, sort of draw attention away from that material for just a second during his direct, just to try and shift the attention from one attorney to another, if I could. And so we talked about, I think, before or before that entire semifinal and final round, I think it was in the quarterfinal, we talked about objections you can make on defense, and 403 specifically was one of them. We just had a lot of specific objections and specific FRE rules that we were ready to look out for just in case we felt we needed to use them. And so that objection is really just to sort of test the water and see if we can or can't get anything in or get anything out.
Now, the two of you, it goes without saying, are excellent performers, excellent on the substance. And I could see, on one hand, saying, I don't want to object to Will or Connor because I know that they're going to sound really smart in response. On the other hand, if your strong suit is objecting, you're like, well, I need to showcase that I know the rules. So whether it be objections or something else, did either of you change your strategy based on drawing each other in the finals, or did you kind of just do your thing?
I'd say that the strategy was the same, but every competitor from the quarterfinal to the final, you're ready to object to only solid things, only specific things that there could be an argument for. You're not going to test the water with the hearsay objection that they're going to have some rule number for. It's really specific, and that's why a couple of the exhibits before, I think Exhibit 17, the receipt, we're not going to test hearsay for Will to see if he knows, exactly what to say for it. We just kind of go for specific things to see if Will prepared for those. And I think that's sort of a rule, not a rule, but like a common concept in high school mock trial is that, you can disrupt with objections. And I know in college mock, I've definitely heard that that's not really something they do. It gets overruled faster. But in high school mock trial, they use them to sort of disrupt the flow of events. And that's sort of what we were trying to do here.
Will, was there anything that you did knowing that you were going to play Connor to adjust? Did you do anything differently, whether it be slight or extreme, to kind of change your strategy?
I don't think anything totally different. Obviously, like we've talked about, Connor is just such a good performer. So I knew I would have to either try and match the performance or find other ways to stand out. I think we'll see on the cross, I tried to make an objection, which didn't end up working out. But I think I didn't really do anything completely different. I just knew he was a really good performer. So I tried to, like we were talking about, bring that up in my own performance.
Yes, Your Honor. As we're going to see in Exhibit 10, that video, Jessica Marks is acting in a particular way. Opposing counsel isn't going to be able to tie that behavior to what Sonny's bar saw that night. Therefore, it's going to mislead the jury into thinking that she acted that way the entire night when Sonny's bar never saw it.
Mr. Mueller?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 403, in order for evidence to be excluded, the risk of prejudice or misleading the jury in this case has to substantially outweigh the probative value. But that's not the case here. This is a video.
That's a great gesture there by Will. I want to the lesson here is gesturing is still a thing even in objection battles.
The jury in this case has to substantially outweigh the probative value. But that's not the case here. This is a video of how Jessica Marks was acting at the defendant's bar. Your Honor, this case is about how Ms. Marks was acting at the defendant's bar.
Well, I really like the way that you argued that. I like that you used parallel, like the same wording when you said this evidence goes to how she was acting at the bar. We have to prove that they knew how she was acting at the bar. I thought that was a really clever way and persuasive way is the better way of describing it of making that argument. And Connor, I was going to ask you if had this been sustained in any of the earlier rounds?
No, it definitely hadn't been sustained, but it had been something where, you know, the coaches specifically talked about that objection, you know, saying they have to sort of to show that Sonny's rooftop bar, the employees, which really is just Sonny Meta on the night in question, saw that she was acting that way, and they're offering it to show that, you know, she was acting that way the entire night. Obviously, it's going to be a cross point, but if you can object to it, I think the value now comes from just sort of showing the jury that Sonny's rooftop bar didn't see her acting that way. We are going to talk about that on cross exam, and we're just kind of foreshadowing our own material during Will's direct exam. So it's really just, I guess it's just a draw of attention, but you know, it hadn't been sustained before. We hadn't really tried that one out before, but it was just to sort of disrupt things.
Yeah, I mean, this to me, this back and forth is an important, it was kind of a fun exercise in mock trial strategy. So there's a couple of kind of things going on here. Number one, you're making an objection that I think is at least to some degree meritorious, right? So that's the starting point. But there's a couple of things you have to consider. One, you guys are both excellent on the rules, and so you have to consider, I'm going to sound good, but is my opponent going to sound good? So there's that. I do think the way that you argued it, Connor, it wouldn't have shocked me if a judge sustained it. I wouldn't have sustained it. I think, as Justin's going to say in a second, I think it's probably more of a weight issue, but I think it was a closer call than it probably should have been given how well you argued it. But I think the thing that you said last is the most important piece here, which is if you've got an argument that is complex, or in this situation, maybe not so complex, if you can preview it to your scoring judges who, as we all know, are not always paying attention, although I think the scoring panel in this round was probably paying attention because it was a very good one. I think that's smart. And so kind of weighing all those things, this is a very high level mock trial strategic kind of thought process that you're going through. Did you have that thought process before you made this objection?
Yeah, if it's an objection that just isn't going to have any of those things, kind of like we talked about Exhibit 17, that receipt, you know, there is, you know, value in objecting in a really early round to someone you've never seen before to see if they know the hearsay, because, you know, even though it's Gladiator, you still have competitors who, you know, might have trained by themselves and just didn't think through all of their evidence and how it's going to come in or not. And so obviously with Will, it's not going to work that way. But if it was an earlier round, there would have been more objections, I think. And that one was sort of a strategic move, like you said. This should work in just about any round, even if you lose it immediately. It's still going to have some value when you get up on cross and start asking the witness sort of the same exact thing, you know, talking about how you never saw Jessica Marks acting in that specific way, like you did in the video. And so that's where the value is.
Probative.
How do you respond, though, to defense's concern that we haven't heard foundation, and they're concerned that you may not be able to lay foundation, that anybody employed by the defendant saw Miss Sparks while she was behaving that way?
Your Honor, whether or not there were employees that saw this particular video, it's still probative and important for the jury to see, as it's a depiction of how Miss Marks was acting at the bar.
Last word, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. It's a problem for the plaintiff because if they can't link that behavior to what Sonny's bar saw, then they can't prove their case today. They have to show that Sonny's bar saw that Jessica was acting that way and then served her more alcohol under the Dram Shop Act.
Okay. I think this is a classic situation of weight, not admissibility. I'm going to allow the video. Exhibit 10 will be admitted, and you're welcome to cross-examine. And of course, your witness can testify about what she did or didn't see. So 10 is
Yes, Your Honor.
Yep.
Could we get Exhibit 10? And can you play that for the members of the jury?
Hi everyone, Morgan and I are in Hollywood. We're at a bar. It's kind of like a Philly bar, except everything is really, really expensive. $10 for a seltzer. And everyone here wants to be a model or an actress. You know, I'd like to thank the Academy. Mom and Dad, you've inspired me. Okay, well, go big or go home.
Ms. Levin, was Jessica acting like that just in that video or throughout the whole night?
She was acting like that throughout the whole night, being a little loud, slurring her words, not really making much sense.
Ms. Levin, do you remember any specific instances where Ms. Marks interacted with the bartenders?
Yes, I do. There was actually two. One time, Sonny came up to the table to serve us a drink, and he said, this one better not be driving home. And one time, Jessica was walking down the stairs and she stumbled into Sonny, and they said, we need to cut this one off.
Ms. Levin, did they cut Jessica off?
No, they didn't. She ended that night by receiving another green tea shot.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
So we've talked a lot so far about adjustments and the adjustments that you made heading into the tournament, the adjustments that you made heading into the round. So Connor, you watched that direct. I agree with your characterization that it was very methodical, and the witness does a great job of being sympathetic without being like obnoxiously over the top mock trial-y sympathetic. So like my point is you're not gonna, you have to be very careful because this is someone that the scoring judges, I think, probably liked. And she won the witness award in the final round. And so presumably they really liked her. Did you change anything by way of your approach on the cross, whether it be content wise or tone wise after watching that?
I think content wise, I don't think I changed anything, but you know, at least I'm not sure if I remember, but I certainly hope when we go to cross, it's not too, you know, dramatically cross attorney. Like I hope it's pretty sympathetic, but I'm actually not sure if I was sympathetic enough and, you know, treated this witness as someone that is clearly that character and has assumed that role. But as far as, you know, seeing any Levin in the tournament, you do have to take a step back and approach the witness, you know, equal to how they approach the character, right? So if they were crying on direct examination and they carry that over on the cross, that's great for both Will and for the witness. But now you have to approach it a certain way because you don't want to, you know, appear to be a scripted attorney that's just trying to cut down this witness. Or if they appear like a normal witness on direct, on cross, I think you can treat them a little bit more like an average witness. It just depends on sort of how they portrayed the character. And I think with this witness, you would want to approach them methodically at first, probably slowly, and then get into your material, whatever that might be.
Will, what was your guidance to Yoshida, either in the semi when you prepped her or in your very brief prep for the final round, in terms of her on cross-examination? Did you give her any guidance, or did you trust her to kind of do her thing?
I don't think I gave any specific guidance. I think we both agreed that the way to play this witness on cross is to just kind of agree to, as much as possible, not fight, especially on a cross like Connor's where it attacks credibility. But I don't think there's any like specific guidance. No, I liked what she did in the semifinal.
Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Levin.
Good afternoon.
You know the plaintiff in this case, Jessica's mother, Ethel Marks, right?
So this isn't something that we've talked about just yet. Will and Connor, I think you both have really good setups in terms of the way your tech and your camera and the lighting and the sound and all that stuff. But the camera is a little bit different. Will's is kind of like the bottom of his rib cage up, and Connor, yours is kind of like just below your shoulders up. How deliberate was your choice for the both of you as to the way you set your camera up? Did you give that some thought? Did you go back and like what went into your calculus there?
I think for me, we got to the side, we were at Venture Academy, and the year before we had a really good setup for Gladiator. We had a really good, we had our film teacher come in and have lights for Hunt, because Hunter was competing. He's my brother, he competes at UCSB. He was competing as well. He had lights, in a separate room, and I was in this specific room actually, with lights, and it was just like a good setup. But for this year, I got there probably a day before the competition started. I was going through my stuff in this exact location, and I just turned the lights in the room to max, and I tried to get, I had probably 5 or 6 books on top of a crate on top of a table, because I wanted to match sort of probably parallel to where I was standing. And, that was kind of a difficult thing to do, because I had to stand for every attorney round. And this was the 3rd attorney round that day, where I was standing for the whole trial. And these trials aren't very long, probably an hour, but, this was one of those trials where you just stand the whole time. And so it sort of just happened to be, probably right below the shoulder, like you said. I didn't want it to be over me. I just wanted to be sort of parallel to where I was.
Did you think about, did you make a deliberate decision to show shoulders up, or did you want to see more of your body? Because you're a very physical performer. And so on one hand, I think you're very expressive with your face. And so getting close to the camera is going to accentuate that strength. At the same time, you're physical. And so if the closer you are, the more it takes away from your physicality. Did that thought process enter your mind at all?
Yes. The year before, I had the camera back a little bit further, and I had lights. And so I could sort of stand and see basically everything that, while I was performing. This time, I tried to keep the background as sort of clear as possible, because that room has like emergency lights and fire alarms. So that would all have been in the background if I had done that. So I tried to keep it a little bit closer. And, I guess you're right. It was more about facial expressions and just general. You can see that there's movement with my hands, but you can't see my hands exactly. And so I just tried to keep it, as close as I could, so that I could keep the background preserved and also have, some sense of presentation, and just sort of keep it in, facial expressions.
Yes, I do.
After Jessica's death, Mrs. Marks, she threatened to sue you. Isn't that true?
Yes, she did. Her daughter had just died, and her emotions may have been all over the place.
Well, instead of suing you, now Mrs. Marks has called you to testify against Sonny's rooftop bar, right?
Yes, she wanted me to talk about what happened that night.
Ms. Levin, I want to talk about what happened that week. Now, that week that Jessica Marks...
So that was really subtle. And I don't know if anyone caught that. So let's watch that back.
Sonny's rooftop bar, right?
Yes, she wanted me to talk about what happened that night.
Ms. Levin, I want to talk about what happened that week.
So Yoshida says, yeah, she just wanted me to come in and say what happened that night. And then you signpost with, let's talk about what happened that week. Was that something you came up with on the fly, or was that written into your script and it just happened to work out very nicely?
So in the script, we talk about, and in the opening and in the closing, we talk about, what happened that week. I think one of the main things was, opposing counsel didn't say anything about what happened on the week of like the 24th or whatever it was. Because throughout that week, she and Jessica went from bar to bar, using those fake IDs, drinking, obviously the legal limit's 0.01, drinking past their legal limit, and then driving home, right? And so that's exactly what they did at Sunny's Rooftop Bar. And the point of that was to say, well, if they went to like all of these other bars, I think it was 8 different bars, and they used their fake IDs, and they drank alcohol, and they drove from 5 of them where Jessica was driving. And of course, when they got to Sunny's Rooftop Bar, they're going to act a certain way. They're going to have the same behavior, and they're not going to get caught because they didn't get caught at. I think the case says Disneyland they were drinking. They're drinking at about 5 other bars, and so of course they're not going to get caught at Sunny's Rooftop Bar. They're just going to act the same way they did before. And so I think that was on the fly, but I knew what I was doing in the sense that in opening I had said that week you're going to learn that they drank at all those bars, and in closing it's the same thing. We learned that they drank at all those bars that week leading up to Sunny's Rooftop Bar, and that goes to show Jessica's negligence, and also goes to show that Jessica had sort of an ability with Morgan Levin, had an ability to drink at bars and get away with using their fake ID, drinking, and then driving.
So being that attentive on cross-examination in the moment to incorporate a witness's answer into your next question essentially is a really advanced skill. I mean, I don't need to tell you guys that. At what point in time in your high school career did you feel like you got comfortable doing that on the fly?
Like junior year, sort of going into junior year, we had a lot of scrimmages and a lot of practices for Empire New York in 2019. We also had one tournament that was sort of an invitational tournament in Vegas. And so I had a lot of practice just doing crosses and doing crosses with like good witnesses like Ishita Goswami. And so I would say probably around there is when we start getting a little more comfortable with cross-examination and just doing your best to think about what your points are and what your script is, but also incorporating the ends of their answers or even the beginnings or content of their answers into the next question.
When I was a student at Drexel, and Justin Bernstein was my coach, he pushed me really hard to punish witnesses on cross for saying dumb things and being responsive in closing arguments and just generally being a more reactive advocate than I had been before that. Did you have someone over your 4 years that really pushed you hard to do that?
I would say that, my dad was one of the coaches throughout high school, and I would do crosses on my coaches, right? I wouldn't have a witness available, but I would have, them available, and they would just try to be as anti my question as possible. So if I asked a question on cross-examination, they would just give me like a one-word answer and just say no. And then I have to impeach them or, re-ask to try and get them to go down my route. And so I think if you have a witness, it could be anyone really, that's just like a roadblock for you at all times and doesn't want to give you anything, then when you get into those high level rounds, like Empire 2020 in New York, I had a witness that, was a character where he was, convicted of a crime. He had the sleeve tattoos. He was trying to be as much as possible anti my question. And so I had to redirect him with his deposition, and he still didn't want to agree. And so you have to just continue to hammer specific points sometimes, and practicing helps a lot with that. Practicing with people that just don't want to give you anything. When you're practicing your cross-exam, they don't want to give you your answer is really good for that. So,
Will, you're also a very responsive advocate. What have you done over the last couple of years to get better at that?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what Connor was talking about. I've crossed my teammates, I've crossed my siblings pretending to be witnesses, things like that. And at least in my experience, the most important thing is experience. Like when I first started, I was absolutely awful at improvising. And I think it's just something that you get better at as you get more confident and you get more trial experience.
So you both brought up something that I've been wanting to ask you, and now's as good of a time as ever. Connor, you mentioned your dad Will, you mentioned your siblings, and one of the things that you guys have in common, aside from all the things we've already talked about, is Connor, you were coached by your dad and your uncle for this tournament. Is that right?
That's right.
And Will, your coach for the entire season just about was your mom.
Yep.
What's it like working with and Connor, I should say one other thing about both of you, actually. Your brother was a Gladiator alum, former teammate of yours. And Will, I don't know that you ever competed with your sister, but she was all over the high school circuit before you were. What's it like kind of working with your family in these high stress situations? Kind of how has that been over the last couple of years for the both of you?
Well, first of all, I didn't know Will was coached. I didn't know he had a family member coaching him until now. But I would say it's really good to have a coach that is close to you. Obviously, I know a lot of people go into their team and they're not sure if they're like their coach. I've had plenty of people on Venture's team, where I see their entire journey of mock trial, because I started watching mock trial in 7th grade, and I saw people go in as a freshman and then exit as a senior, and I could see the relationships they established on the team, who they sort of worked with, whether or not they liked the coaches, to what degree they were close with the coaches. And obviously a lot of the really successful attorneys have to be close to their coaches to have those discussions. There's a lot of material, especially for high schoolers who go in not knowing anything, and then exiting knowing a good amount about the FRE and about how mock trial works. I would say having my dad and my uncle as coaches is, it was a great thing to have, because I could work with them throughout, whenever I needed to. There's definitely a lot of discussion about mock trial when you have your family as mock trial coaches, talking about the tournaments, talking about the people you're going to face, talking about who needs to do what to succeed.
All right, before we get to Will, because this has been a pretty non-controversial episode so far, and I haven't pushed either of you, so I'm going to push you a little bit. I have met your dad and your uncle many times, and they are characters, to say the least. You got to have some kind of story or something that you can tell us, reflecting on your 4 years, about what it's like working with the two of them. I mean, have you guys ever had a disagreement about something mock trial wise? Have you guys have they ever had a disagreement about something substantively with coaching? Tell me something about those two that maybe people don't know.
Challenges. A great example is in 2019 for New York. I worked with my uncle probably until 12 a.m. just on one specific objection. He wanted to say it's going to provide a chilling effect on the jury if they have this testimony, and we worked on that until the morning of facing Enrico. And then we get to the Southern District of New York courthouse, and he's like, just don't do that. And so I just threw it out the window. Successful.
All right, next year, Gladiator 2022. Let's say Justin decides to do something totally different, and he says, for Gladiator 2022, it's going to be a field of two people. It's going to be your dad and your uncle in the field. They get 4 weeks to prep. One of them gets you as their coach. The other gets your brother. Who wins?
Between my dad and my uncle?
Yeah.
That's a great hypothetical. I think my dad will win on presentation and my uncle will win on objections. And so whatever value the jury is going to give those is going to dictate who wins. Am I coaching my dad or my uncle?
You can coach your dad. We'll stay under with your uncle.
Okay. If I'm coaching my dad, it's going to be super presentation based. He's going to be giving the best presentation of the tournament. And I think if Hunter coaches my uncle, it's going to be a lot of, really high level and technical objection arguments, as well as, questions that, are pretty good. So I think it could go either way. I would probably give it to whoever presents better. So I guess I'd give it to my dad. But who knows? He might, have a witness that gets impeached or a long objection that he wasn't prepared for if my uncle's competing against him.
Fair. Was your brother in the same place as you when you were in the final, when you competed in the final, or was he somewhere else?
No, he's at UCSB. He has an apartment, and so he was texting me. Because they compete against William's sister at University of Oregon. They go to invitationals where UCSB faces University of Oregon. And so, he was kind of adding to the pressure, just being like, you have to go in there and do your best because, his sister's competing against us. So it was just fun, but he wasn't near me.
Did you guys talk on the phone after the round?
We talked online. We got into, a call where we got to talk, but, before the round, it was just texts from people, he was in UCSB, but he watched it, he got to see everything. And so that was really cool.
What did he tell you after the round?
Immediately after the round, he texted and, just all caps, was just super happy. I was really stoked that he, was impressed by that. And it was just really fun. After the round, though, we didn't even really talk about the round specifically. We talked about just the competition and just how everything went with the competitors and who we saw, who we faced. And I'm not even sure what we were doing exactly, but it was a Discord call, so we were probably playing video games after that and just taking our mind off things.
Back to business.
Yeah.
Okay. Will, what's it like working with your mom?
Oh, it's good. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Connor said about working with your family. I think the one thing that sticks out to me is that because you live together and you're constantly seeing each other, any discussion that you have in practice about mock trial is going to translate just in your regular life. So we've probably spent way too much time debating certain things outside of practice, just talking about the case, talking about material. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like that's the secret to the success. I mean, we have two people in the final it's basically mock trials of family business for the two of you. So it feels like that is kind of the secret. Will, was your sister in the house with you when you were in the final round, or was she somewhere else also?
Yeah, I think pretty much everyone in my family was in the house. I was downstairs and they were upstairs because for whatever reason, when I compete, I just like to sort of be by myself and like not hear any outside noise, stuff like that. But obviously after the round, they came down and they congratulated me and we talked about it all.
When the announcement was made that you were going to the final, what was the reaction in your house like?
Well, they were in the room right above me and like watching the award ceremony. So I just remember like hearing a lot of muffled screaming when they said my and Connor's name, but that's pretty much it.
That week that Jessica Marks visited you, you recall how many different bars you and Jessica went to?
Yes, I do. We went to a few different bars.
You said a few different bars. You went to 8 different bars.
Okay, so I know everyone at home wants to kill me for pausing this so much, but I have to point out this too. I have 2 things to ask you. Number one, did you ask an open-ended question there on purpose?
Yes.
What was the strategy?
Well, I specifically said, I think, I'm looking for a number, how many bars did you go to that week? And the answer is 8 from the deposition or from the hearing where they sort of go through everything. But from, this witness, I didn't expect her to know the answer to that. I don't expect really anyone to have looked through and have counted every single bar that they went to prepare for Morgan Levin. Obviously we talked about how this is the best witness in the tournament, but I still think that it's not really something people would go to. They're not going to look for the exact number of bars they went to. And, even if this witness was the witness themselves, if we called the actual Morgan Levin to the stand, if we were to hypothetically make that individual, I don't think they would remember. I think they'd say probably a few bars.
So this, to me, I mean, you were doing that understanding the witness probably was going to have a tough time recalling or was going to get it wrong in terms of how many bars there were. But one of the things that I always think about as a coach when I'm crafting the content with my team is, what do we do if the witness says something that we're not expecting? For example, in this situation, what if the witness had said a number? What if they had said 4? I mean, to me, that would have been a tough impeachment, because I think what you had said a second ago, and I don't remember because we wrote this a long time ago now, but that the number of bars was in different places. It wasn't like a clean 8 somewhere. You would have had to go through and kind of piece it together. Did you have a plan in place for how you were going to do that, understanding that 8 was kind of derived from page 1 has 1 and page 7 has 1 and page 11 has 2 and things like that?
That's a good question. I did not have a demonstrative ready for that. I should have, actually, now that I think about it, because I had a demonstrative ready for a lot of things. For example, on the other witness, the defendant, I had a demonstrative ready to talk about the foundation for some things that I was bringing in, and I had highlighted a lot of things, but I didn't have a demonstrative for the number of bars. I don't even think I instructed my second chair that we might need to pull up the exact page. I might have said the page to my second chair, but I can't, predict if they'll actually remember what page and bring it up. So that is kind of a risky thing. It was all kind of held on one page where they listed the names of the bars. But you're right, there wasn't a specific number that they had. It was just sort of like, on Monday we went to Disneyland and she had a glass or two of wine, and then on Tuesday she went to this place. And so I should have had a demonstrative for that, because that is a risky move to,
and that's a little cleaner than I remember it being written. I'm sure you know better than I do, but still, I mean, that could have been messy, and so it was a gamble that paid off for you. And I thought it looked really responsive.
Isn't that true?
Yes, that's correct.
And from those bars, Jessica Marks drove from 5 of them. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct.
You're aware that if you're acting intoxicated at a bar, you're likely to be asked to leave. Isn't that right?
Yes, you may be asked to leave.
So in the presence of someone like Miss Mehta, you didn't want to come across as intoxicated, right?
Well, maybe, yes.
So let's talk about how you did appear that night. Your Honor, this time my second chair is going to be displaying Exhibit 26 constructively outside the presence of the jury for any objections. Your Honor, we move those portions of this exhibit into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections to those portions, Your Honor.
Okay,
Okay.
you can read them into.
So this was the pivotal moment in the trial. This was, or I should say, one of the big moments in the trial. That, because it was a very clean round, and a lot of times, most times when you're playing someone who's excellent and you're an excellent competitor, like that was what this round was. There's not really much that happens. It's usually pretty boring. There's no fights or fireworks. It's kind of just both competitors kind of doing their thing and doing it really well. But this was an opportunity. This was one of the few objection battles, and this was an opportunity for one of you to hurt the other. First off, Connor, for those who are watching and maybe don't know what just happened. So we've got our plaintiff witness on the stand, and Connor is admitting statements from an unavailable witness, from that unavailable witness's deposition, who was at the bar that night and made certain observations of this witness's demeanor, whether she was drunk or how much she was drinking that night and things like that. Did you have any internal discussion with your coaches as to whether doing that was appropriate here, whether it was objectionable here, whether it could cause issues? What was that discussion like?
that definitely happened. We had plenty of discussion about whether or not it'd be admissible. I personally wanted those in, and so I constructed that. I made that demonstrative, and then from there, I had to sort of argue it by myself, pretty much all the time, because it was something where I was pretty stressed about. Is someone going to object to this? Is someone going to be preparing for this specific thing? I would say that I was kind of preparing for someone to do it as well if I was on plaintiff, and I sort of had some things ready for that. But I had to, I guess I argued objections that were potential with myself in the days leading to the tournament, several times. Pretty much every day, I would go through exactly what they could object to. I talked about, I had a demonstrative actually, and this is what I was going to say before. I had a demonstrative for the specific portion of 803 where I had check marks for how we've established the foundation. I said, stipulation 12 deals with this part. This is an unavailable witness, but then specific to this former testimony exception, I had another check mark to discuss, how it applies to former testimony, how this witness was unavailable, how both parties had a chance to look at the testimony and make direct and cross examinations off of that testimony. And so I was prepared to bring that up if there was an objection. And I think not objecting is a good move, because I would have had a demonstrative ready for that specific objection if he had gone into it. And it would have been, hopefully it would be something that I can use to highlight objections and demonstratives.
So I want to just watch the way it came in, and then we'll pause it again and talk about one other thing.
Or we can have them constructively in. It's your choice.
Yes, Your Honor. Let's have those first two constructively in, but Mr. Wright, can we get that last one on the screen? Question: were you concerned about Jessica getting behind the wheel? Answer: she was in better shape than her friend. Her friend could barely walk in a straight line to the Uber. Question: how was she walking? Answer: fine.
Objection,
I
Your Honor.
guess.
Lack of foundation.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
These portions are already in evidence.
May I respond, Your Honor?
That's my understanding too. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. We agreed to allow those portions of the document into evidence. However, those haven't been read onto the record or to the members of the jury. So there's a lack of foundation as to how this witness would know how she was walking and whether or not he was concerned about her getting behind the wheel.
May I respond to that?
No, the objection's overruled.
So, Will, this is what I think happened here. You tell me if I'm wrong. It sound to me, watching this in real time, it felt like you didn't like, you knew that something about what Connor was doing you didn't like, and you're like, this shouldn't be happening, and I need to object. And the problem was, I think that thought process happened slowly, and by the time you made the decision to object, you had already not objected when Connor admitted the statements a minute earlier, and by then it was too late. Was that kind of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. First off, I'll say, obviously, that's not the right objection to make. I knew that, I think, as soon as I made it, if you can look at my face in the video. But I will say, just as a bit of background, I think at that point in the round, I felt like I was losing the objections check mark, or even if I hadn't, in my experience, the defendant direct, which was going to come up next, was pretty, there weren't a lot of objections. Like in my previous rounds, I found it hard to find things to object to, just because the gist of the direct is, what are the signs of intoxication you look for? Did you see those signs and miss marks?
And for those of you who are watching at home and don't know, the way that this ballot works is instead of a conventional point system, 1 to 10 for each part of the trial, it's check marks. And so there's 7 available check marks: opening, closing, direct cross, theme and theory, evidence, and responsiveness, I believe, are the 7. I know we changed them for this year. Justin changed them for this year, I should say. And so you felt like in that moment, in order to win the objection check mark, you needed to make something happen on this witness, because on the next witness, it was probably going to be clean, which I think is a smart thought process. But Connor, if Will had objected, and this is kind of what I was thinking at the time, if Will had objected to something non-hearsay, and he objected obviously before the statements were admitted, did you have something prepared for that?
Yeah. So we were offering 3 slides, and before that day, before the quarter and semi and final round, I didn't have those slides, those foundation slides, because those first 2 we didn't read. Justin said, you can have them constructively on the record or you can read them. And I was like, let's have the first 2 constructively on the record, because they offer foundation for the last slide. And the last slide is really all that we were trying to offer, trying to read in so that the jury could hear it. So if he objected foundation, I would have pointed to those 2 slides. Those were constructively read onto the record, but I would have said that those provide foundation for the testimony that we're going to elicit here in a second. But before that day, I didn't have a slide ready for that. So if I had gone defense, the day before, I wouldn't have, slides for foundation ready, and his objection would have or should have been sustained, because it's not currently being offered into evidence.
Yeah. So my view on it is, and it's easy for me to say, in the moment, I've done things similar to what we just saw Will do, where you make an objection and you're late, or it's not quite what you wanted. And it's really tough in a high pressure round like this to articulate something on the fly in a way that you'd like to. But kind of slowing it down and having the benefit of thinking about it, I think the appropriate objection here would have been to say that essentially a 403 argument that this is misleading. And it's misleading because, or confusing, because what's essentially happening here is we are pausing the cross-examination of one witness to read the testimony of another witness to this witness and then not ask any questions about it. And I think you did ask some questions like, your testimony, you weren't actually stumbling around or whatever the witness describes in that deposition. But I think I would have essentially made let's take it to the nth degree and say, and let's assume that this witness were live, right? And not by deposition. You couldn't stop the cross-examination and call this witness and then have the witness testify to what's in the dep. I mean, you couldn't do that, obviously. And I think to the extent that you make that analogy to what's happening here and say it's incredibly confusing and misleading to do it this way. If they want to do this, put on a case, read it in their case, wait till the witness is off the stand. There's no need to just pause the cross and like inject this other unrelated witness into the situation. Had you thought of, maybe not quite like I articulated, but something where someone basically threw their hands up and said, this isn't fair. This isn't appropriate. Had you thought of what you would say if that came up?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the main things that I would argue, to myself is foundation. First of all, before I had the slides, I would think about how I could argue foundation up to the point of saying, we can constructively have portions of this exhibit that do lay foundation right onto the record. Hearsay, we have to demonstrate for hearsay, but then 403 specifically, if they object 403, I would get into that myself. I would think about sort of how we could respond to that. And sort of, you kind of have to think about the nature of a mock trial tournament sometimes with 403 and argue. You can't recall witnesses, right? You can't have this witness here and then call another witness and then recall the witness and say, these are the facts that you heard or whatever it is. You can't really recall the witness. That would probably be my first thing. The second thing is, we can't call this witness. We can't call Stevie Redditch to the stand, unfortunately. So we're not going to get any testimony from him. But we do have a stipulation. Both parties agree he's unavailable. We can say that this is former testimony admissible because both parties had, months in the case. It's like a year to make directs and crosses based on this testimony. And because of that, we know that, the foundation's sufficient through those portions we're offering, hearsay satisfied, and this testimony is going to be, it's not going to be prejudicial. It's not going to mislead them because of sort of the nature of the testimony and the nature of the competition.
A question, how was she walking? Answer, fine, I guess. I don't really remember. I just remember her friend was wobbling like she'd been in the ring with a boxer. Now, I want to talk about how you were acting that night. Is your testimony you weren't slurring your words, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Your testimony you weren't walking the way that deposition just described, right? You weren't walking like you'd been in the ring with a boxer, true?
Yes, that's correct. I had a little to drink, but I was just a little buzzed.
Let's talk about your interactions with Miss Maida. Each time Miss Maida came to your table, she was there for less than a minute, right?
Connor, we haven't talked about this yet, and we can't let this whole video go without talking about it because I think it's so obvious that's why it's like almost not even worth talking about. You're just so good with your gesturing. I mean, it is, it's not over the top, and the analogy that I always draw with my students is baseball analogy. If you're a pitcher, you throw your fastball 80% of the time, and your fastball is your hands at your sides. And you work in your curveball or your changeup or whatever, and that's where you do different things. You gesture from side to side. You do different things with your hands or your body, and you just do such a good job of being deliberate about those decisions, but not being over the top. Were you always just naturally a physical performer, or did you kind of work on that and make that Was it a conscious choice to make that a hallmark of you as a competitor?
Yeah, I definitely would say that, since freshman year, I think I started off as an opener for a couple of years. I was an opener freshman year, sophomore year, and then junior year until Gladiator. And so I hadn't given a closing until junior year. It was all about opening. It was all about scripted movement. It was all about having a presence, and performing as an opener is definitely what led me to have just a lot of gestures where you can have gestures. And so I didn't want to have too many gestures. I didn't want to be over the top, because you definitely can be over the top to the point where you don't look credible. You don't look like a real attorney. In high school, there's definitely more liberty, more freedom there, where you can have more gestures than I think in college mock. But I think in college mock, there's really good examples, people like Shepard and Sidney Gaskins, who have really good presentation quality. And I think you can still use that, even in college mock, you can have that really good presentation quality. And that's something that I've just tried to tone down and I'm still trying to sort of refine that so it's not too much and it actually comes across and is good.
Yes, 30 seconds to a minute, she would talk to Jessica and I.
During these instances, her attention was divided between you and Jessica. Isn't that true?
Yes, I guess you could say that.
You remember there were other tables at the bar that night that Miss Maida was serving.
Yes, that's correct.
On direct exam, you showed us a video of Miss Marks. You never showed that video to Miss Maida, did you?
No, I didn't.
In fact, you never showed that video to any of the bar staff that night.
No, I didn't.
You don't have any videos of how Miss Marks was acting when Sunny Meadow was around, do you?
No, I don't.
You can't remember a single specific instance where Miss Marks slurred her words in front of Miss Meadow.
No, I can't, but I do remember the bartender saying that we needed to cut her off.
Well, that wasn't my question. I asked you if you could remember a specific instance where Miss Marks slurred her words in front of Miss Meadow, and you can't.
It's a great witness control. I mean, both of you were just excellent at witness control, and that's just a great example. And one of the things I think advocates do who are learning witness control is they overdo it. And one of the, I think, the most advanced skills of a cross-examiner is knowing when to witness control and picking your battles. And we're about 90% of the way through the cross. And this is the first time that you've said, well, that wasn't really my question. Were you thoughtful about that, understanding this was going to be a sympathetic witness, that you didn't want to overdo it?
I think so. I think that, when she offers testimony that wasn't really related to what I was talking about, you definitely do want to highlight that you can have witness control at least a little bit, because you're not really going to have an opportunity, kind of like how Will said, you're not going to have an opportunity to, you can't have an opportunity to object or witness control, because there's only two witnesses. You're going to cross a witness and direct a witness, or you're going to direct a witness and cross a witness. So you don't have opportunity, especially when you're getting to the end of your cross exam. You're not going to have an opportunity to really showcase that in front of the jury. And so you definitely want to take your opportunity when you do have that. She was clearly a witness where, and Will even said that he sort of trained her a little bit to agree with the questions. You could tell she started to say things that weren't related to the question, or she wanted to sort of elaborate on that specifically. And that's an opportunity for you as an attorney to highlight that and to say, that wasn't exactly what I asked you. What I asked you was this, and that's a yes, right? And so that's all it really was. I wasn't trying to be too, sympathetic to the sympathetic witness. I was just trying to sort of keep her answering the questions. She is able to sort of go off the path a little bit, but you definitely want to make sure that you have control as an attorney.
That's correct.
You also talked about that receipt, Exhibit 17. Mr. Wright, can we get Exhibit 17 on screen? Ms. Maida, that's the receipt, and that's you filling in the total, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's the math error you made on the gratuity, true?
Yes, that's correct. It had been a long night.
I haven't said this yet, but the two of you, the technology in the direct and the cross was really good. Did you guys do your own tech? Were your second chairs doing it? Were your coaches helping you? Who did your tech?
Yeah, for tech, that's something that I sort of came probably a couple of days before competition, came to my room and worked on exactly what we wanted to bring in. And then I had to, sit down with my second chair, who's my cousin who just graduated as well, Ethan Wright. And I worked with him on sort of when you're going to bring things up, how to bring them up, how long we want to bring them up, what question we're going to put them down. And so I sort of worked with him on that to perfect these.
Will, who worked on your tech for you?
My second chair was Julian McGaw. He's junior and he's on the mock trial team at my school.
He took the lead with all of your slides and things like that.
Yeah, and I think similar to what Connor was saying a moment ago, we definitely did practice it a lot because I think on Zoom, it's a way to differentiate yourself between other really good competitors like at Gladiator, because, everyone's going to be a good performer like we've talked about. Everyone's going to have good material. Since Zoom is so new, I think, having good slides, showing that you can pull up an exhibit, highlight things, have demos and close is important and can separate yourself from another competitor. And going back to what we talked about at the beginning, part of why I chose plaintiff in the final round was because I felt like our tech was a lot better on that side. Defense, we only had a couple exhibits, maybe like one demo in the close. Plaintiff, I just felt we had it down much better, and that was a factor in why I chose it.
Let's talk about what happened when you left the bar. After you paid that bill, you and Jessica walked outside the bar, right?
Yes, we did.
No one from the bar was with you when you went outside. True?
That's correct. Yes.
Jessica, she didn't stumble into the parking lot, did she?
No, she didn't. Not that I can recall.
Out of
Did
curiosity,
you fall down
Connor,
when she was walking out of the bar?
pause it. Out of curiosity, did you incorporate that question about her not stumbling out of the bar based on what I said? I think in my open about how, when I was setting out the story, how she stumbled out in the parking lot, barely able to walk, or was that something that you had in before? I was just curious about that.
That was a point that I had before. I don't think I had caught on to the fact that you had said that. I might have, but I don't think it was something that, definitely wasn't something that drew the question. That was just one of the pockets was, when you left the bar and were in the sight of the bar staff, they didn't see you, or they didn't see Jessica stumble out of the bar, didn't fall, So that was something that I had before, but I didn't notice that that's something that you had actually talked about in your opening.
For you, Will, I'm not on the selection committee for Gladiator, unfortunately, but I have a sense that you're going to be invited back next year. Maybe not, but I think you'll probably get an invitation. You were second as a junior, and obviously everyone going into the tournament next year is going to know not only that you were second at Gladiator this year and you had an incredible run at the tournament this year, but I think people will start to pay attention to what you did leading up to this. That if they didn't know before, they know now. You might have a target on your back next year. How does that make you feel?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't really thought about it. Like, obviously I'm really glad that I get to return next year. And like you're saying, hopefully do Gladiator. Mainly because, first off, I get another shot at going to the championship round, which is a ton of fun, but also just because I love competing. And, I would have been sad if that was my last one. So I'm glad that I have more opportunities to compete, more opportunities to go up against really amazing competitors and just do this for another season.
Connor, you're going to UCLA. You're starting in just a couple of weeks, actually, at the time that we're recording this. You planning to compete, I'm assuming?
Yes, I do plan on competing.
So first off, you said your brother's at UC Santa Barbara?
Yes.
So he's teaming up with Elena Young. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Elena Young, for those of you who don't know, 2019 Gladiator runner-up and was top 10 in 2020, I believe, as well. And she's an excellent competitor. I would assume that UCLA and UC Santa Barbara see each other quite a bit. You've been teammates with your brother for all these years. Is it going to be weird seeing him on the other side?
I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is and sort of how, I haven't even tried out, but, I hope I get to see him, in competition, be it like a invitational or, regionals, orcs, whatever it is. I do
Or in the
want to
national championship, ideally.
Yeah, maybe we might see each other. That would be really cool. If not this year, then hopefully in the upcoming years I can see him competing. It would be really fun.
Are you excited? How does it make you feel that you're going to be a college competitor in a couple of weeks? You've got 4 years of that coming your way. Are you excited to get into it? What adjustments are you going to make? Tell me about that.
I think what I should be doing is sort of watching rounds of college mock trial to sort of adapt my style to that. For high school, I found what I thought was my best style, where it was pretty dramatic. It was pretty, be it like facial expressions or body expressions, you want it to be dramatic. I think in college mock trial, it's a little bit more subtle, and mastering all of those advanced subtleties is going to be something that I'm going to have to do if I want to be successful in college mock trial. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see how it goes, to compete against, all of the competitors that have already graduated from Gladiator and have gone on to college, as well as those that, are going to be up and coming. I'm sure Will is, he's going to do college mock trial as well. And just sort of having knowledge of the competitors and being a part of it is going to be something that I'm really excited about.
Will, any chance you'll join Connor next year at UCLA?
Maybe. We'll see. I don't know yet.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean, jokes aside, I think the coolest part about Gladiator and Empire and those who pay attention to the high school circuit is you're really seeing the college and law school stars of the future. And if you look at our Gladiator alums, they're going on to do really good things at the college circuit, and hopefully the law school circuit for some of them soon. And I think this is just the start of it. And the reason I wanted to have the two of you on to watch this incredible round is we're going to, I think, look back at this in 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years from now when you're competing on the law school circuit. And it's going to be really cool. I predict this is probably not the last time the two of you are going to cross paths. And hopefully it's in another big round that we'll get to watch on the show. And I'm really excited for the two of you and your futures. And thanks so much for coming on.